Imagine this: you're no longer waiting for their text, and yet, they can't stop thinking about you. You stopped chasing, and suddenly, you became unforgettable. What if, the secret to being missed isn't in doing more, but doing less and becoming more of yourself? We've all been there. That anxious moment when we wonder, do they miss me? Do they even think about me anymore? It eats away at our peace. We check our phones. We replay memories. We try to do something to spark a reaction. But the more we try to make them miss us, the more they seem to drift away. What if that whole mindset is the problem? Once stop chasing, start becoming. I spent years chasing people. Chasing love. Chasing approval. Chasing that text back, that call, that feeling that I mattered to someone. And the harder I chased, the further it all seemed to slip away. I remember once I was 43. Divorced, lonely, and trying to hold on to something that was already gone. There was someone I deeply cared about. She had moved on. But I hadn't. I'd send messages. Wait hours, sometimes days. When she replied with just a thanks or hope you're well, I'd read those 2 words 100 times. Looking for meaning in silence. Looking for hope in something that no longer had life. I wasn't just chasing her. I was chasing the feeling of being wanted. Of being remembered. Of being missed. But one night, sitting alone in my apartment, staring at my phone like it owed me happiness, I asked myself a question that changed everything. What if I stopped chasing her, and started becoming me? Not the me that begged for attention. Not the me that waited around for crumbs of affection. But the me I lost somewhere between heartbreak, regret, and the need to be needed. That night, I picked up a journal. And I wrote one sentence: I am not chasing anyone. I am becoming someone. That was the beginning. I didn't have all the answers. I still had nights when I felt empty. But slowly, I started rebuilding. I went back to reading. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, voices from thousands of years ago that somehow understood what I was feeling. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That line from Marcus hit me hard. So I started becoming. Not to prove anything to anyone. Not to make her miss me. But because I was tired of being someone I didn't even respect anymore. I started exercising again. Not for the body but for the discipline. I joined a local group that volunteered on Sundays. Not to look good, but to feel useful. And every night, I sat with myself. I wrote. I reflected. I forgave myself for all the chasing. And here's the irony. When I stopped chasing, she reached out. She said, "You seem different. Calmer. Stronger. I miss talking to you." I smiled. Not because I got what I wanted, but because I no longer needed it. The truth is, when you chase, people run. But when you grow, people notice. You become a presence, not a pursuer. A magnet, not a beggar. And even if they don't return, you're still proud of the person you've become. That's what Stoicism taught me. That the power is in becoming, not to impress anyone, but to honor yourself. And that brings me to the next truth. Because once you stop chasing, you'll start seeing who stays in your life not because they're needed, but because they're meant to be there. Let's talk about that next. 2. Don't seek to be missed, seek to be remembered for your depth. There was a moment, years ago, when someone I once loved told me, "You're always around, but I don't feel you." At first, I didn't understand. I was texting, calling, showing up, trying to be present, trying to prove I cared. But that sentence stuck with me: I don't feel you. Because presence isn't about proximity. It's about depth. And truth is, I had none. I was trying to be liked. Trying to be missed. Doing everything to be noticed, but offering nothing real to be remembered. You see, I confused attention with connection. I believed that if I was always visible, I'd somehow become unforgettable. But Stoicism taught me a different way. Waste no more time on what others think of you. Focus only on what you are. Marcus Aurelius' depth is not loud. It doesn't chase. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply exists quietly, calmly, fully. And when it's gone, it leaves an echo. I think of my grandfather. He was a quiet man. He didn't talk much. He didn't demand space. But when he passed, you could feel the silence he left behind. Not because he tried to be remembered, but because his presence was deep. He listened with his whole being. He showed up when no one else did. He lived by values, not by noise. And that stayed with people. That's what I started aiming for. To live with such depth, that even in silence, I could still be felt. I stopped trying to make people miss me. I started being fully present when I was with them. Really present, no phone, no pretending. Just eye contact. Heartfelt listening. Honesty. I started asking better questions. Not "do you like me?" but "did I bring any peace to your day?" Did my words hold weight, or were they just noise? I learned to leave people better than I found them. Not for praise. Not for credit. But because that's the kind of presence that lingers. Being missed, it fades. But being remembered, that's something else. It comes from living with integrity. From having convictions, not just charm. From being grounded, when others are drifting. The Stoics taught us this: don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Epictetus, you want to be remembered? Live in a way that makes people feel safe, feel challenged, feel inspired just by being around you. You want someone to feel your absence. Make sure they felt your depth in your presence. And if they never say it out loud, that's okay. Real presence isn't always noticed. But it's never forgotten. Now, this brings us to something deeper still. Because once you stop trying to be missed, you'll start living like someone who doesn't need to prove anything. And that's when something beautiful happens. You stop clinging to results. You do your part, and then you let go. That's our next step. 3. Detach from outcomes. I used to measure everything by the result. If she texted back, it meant I mattered. If my effort was noticed, it meant I was valuable. If things went my way, I felt in control, powerful, even. But when they didn't, when I poured my heart into something or someone, and nothing came of it, I crumbled. I remember one night, sitting alone at my kitchen table. I had planned a thoughtful surprise for someone I cared about. It wasn't grand. Just dinner, candles, a handwritten note, something real. And she never showed up. No message. No explanation. Nothing. I sat there in silence for a long time, staring at a full table, and an empty chair. And in that silence, a voice inside me whispered, was this dinner about love, or was it about being seen, appreciated, validated? I didn't like the answer. Because I realized I wasn't acting from love. I was acting from expectation. I had tied my piece to her response. And when it didn't arrive, I felt broken. That night, I opened up a book I hadn't touched in years. Epictetus. And on that very page, I read, some things are up to us, and some things are not. I read it over and over. Some things are up to us, our actions, our choices, our intentions. But not the outcome. Not how people respond. Not how life unfolds. It was a hard truth to swallow. Because like many people in their 40s, I had lived most of my life believing, if I do good, I deserve good. If I love, I should be loved back. If I show effort, it should be rewarded. But Stoicism teaches something different. Something stronger. You give, not to get. You act, not to guarantee a return. You love, because it's who you are, not because it ensures someone will stay. That's what detachment from outcome truly means. Not that you stop caring, but that you stop clinging. You pour your soul into something and then you let it go. You do your part and then surrender the rest. It's not indifference. It's wisdom. You still feel. You still hope. But you are no longer enslaved by what you cannot control. I started applying this everywhere. In my work. In my relationships. Even in small things like how I started my day. I would say to myself, today, I will act with integrity. I will speak kindly. I will try my best. And what happens after that, is not mine to own. That mindset changed everything. Because suddenly, I wasn't disappointed so often. Not because life got easier, but because I stopped expecting it to bend to my will. And ironically, I became lighter. More joyful. More free. People started noticing the shift. Hey, you seem calmer. Yeah. Because I stopped trying to control what wasn't mine to carry. So here's what I've learned: you can give your best effort and still lose. You can love deeply and still be left behind. You can show up fully and still be misunderstood. But none of that takes away your worth. Because your worth isn't measured by results. It's measured by your character. And when you live like that, people will feel it. They may not say it out loud. But they'll sense your peace. And they'll remember your presence. Because outcomes fade. But authenticity stays. Now, let's take this even further. Because once you stop clinging to outcomes, you realize something even more powerful: you don't need attention. You need depth. Let's talk about that in the next lesson. 4. Improve in silence. There was a time when every little change I made, I wanted someone to see it. If I went to the gym, I'd post a photo. If I read a book, I'd highlight quotes not for me, but for likes. If I worked late, I hoped someone would say, "Wow, you're so dedicated." I was growing, but only loud enough to be noticed. And that's not real growth. That's performance. I remember waking up one morning and looking at myself in the mirror. I had just hit 45. There were lines on my face I hadn't seen before. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel proud of who I was becoming. Not because I wasn't doing the work, but because I was doing it for the wrong reasons. To be seen. To be praised. To be admired. But the Stoics, they saw life differently. Seneca once wrote, "Don't waste your time looking for applause. Do what must be done." That line hit something deep inside me. Because real improvement doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't shout. It doesn't ask to be noticed. It's quiet. It's patient. And it's powerful. So I started doing things differently. I stopped telling people my plans. I started walking more, not for steps on an app, but to clear my mind. I picked up a pen again. Wrote in my journal. Not to post quotes, but to face myself. I began listening to my body, what it needed, not what would look impressive online. And here's the strange part: the less I talked about my growth, the more I actually grew. I didn't need validation anymore. I started sleeping better. Thinking more clearly. Laughing not for show, but because I finally felt light. People began to notice. They'd say, "Something about you is different." And I'd smile. Not because they noticed, but because I didn't need them to. That's the beauty of silent improvement. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not seeking applause. You're simply showing up for yourself day by day, quietly, consistently. You see, the oak tree doesn't grow louder than the flower. But it stands tall, steady, and strong because its roots run deep. That's the kind of growth I wanted. Not flashy. Not loud. But real. Stoicism taught me this: the reward is not in being noticed. The reward is in becoming someone you respect in the quiet. You don't need to announce every small victory. You just need to keep walking your path. One step at a time. Because when you improve in silence, you carry a calm that others can feel. You speak less but your presence says more. You enter rooms quietly but you leave echoes. And when people think of you, they may not remember every word you said, but they'll remember the way you carried yourself. With stillness. With strength. With substance. So ask yourself, are you becoming someone loud, or someone lasting? And if the answer still isn't clear, just keep going. Keep building. Silently. Because the ones who grow quietly, are the ones who can't be shaken. Now let's go even deeper. Because once you've learned to improve in silence, you'll naturally unlock the next power of Stoicism, emotional independence, the kind that makes your presence magnetic, and your absence unforgettable. Let's talk about that next. 5. Master emotional independence. There was a time in my life when how I felt in the morning depended entirely on someone else. If they texted back, I felt alive. If they didn't, the day felt heavy. If they were warm, I smiled. If they were distant, I spiraled. I had unknowingly given them the keys to my emotional world. And one day, I remember clearly, I was sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot, phone in my hand. Refresh. No message. Refresh again. Still nothing. And that's when I whispered to myself, you've built a life where someone else controls your sky. That sentence cracked something open in me. Because I realized, in that quiet moment, I wasn't just emotionally attached, I was emotionally dependent. I let their behavior define my mood. Their silence became my self-worth. Their attention became my oxygen. That's not love. That's imprisonment. It was Marcus Aurelius who wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. The Stoics weren't saying don't feel. They were saying, don't let your feelings be owned by anyone but you. So I began the hardest work of my life, taking back emotional ownership. I started with small things. Instead of waking up and checking my phone, I made my bed. Took a walk, wrote 3 things I was grateful for, even if they were simple: hot coffee, a quiet room, my heartbeat. Every time the urge to check hit me, I asked, is this about them, or about my emptiness? And often, it was the latter. So instead of feeding that need with attention, I filled it with purpose. Books. Journaling. Work that mattered. Moments of stillness. It didn't happen overnight. There were days I relapsed, waiting on calls, watching the clock. But slowly, the weight of emotional dependence lifted. And something beautiful began to happen. I stopped fearing their absence. I stopped needing their validation. I stopped being tossed around by someone else's emotional weather. Instead, I became my own anchor. I could still care deeply. Still love. Still hope. But I no longer needed it to feel whole. And you know what? That shift changed everything. People started treating me differently. With more respect. With more curiosity. Because when you're emotionally independent, you carry a calm that others can't ignore. They don't feel you need them. They feel you choose them. And that's rare. That's powerful. That's attractive. So here's what Stoicism taught me: emotional independence isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming whole. You don't cut off your feelings, you reclaim them. You stop handing over your peace to people who never asked for the responsibility. And maybe, just maybe, the moment you no longer need to be missed, is the moment you start being remembered. Now that we've learned to stand on our own, to hold steady in the face of silence, let's explore something even deeper. How do we leave a presence, even when we're not in the room? That's the next lesson. 6. Be fully present even in absence. A few years ago, a friend of mine passed away unexpectedly. We weren't especially close. We didn't talk every day. But when he was around, you felt him. Not because he was loud. Not because he told great stories. But because when he looked at you, you felt like the only person in the room. No phone in hand. No glancing over your shoulder. Just full, quiet attention. Real presence. At his funeral, I remember someone saying, he didn't leave a lot behind. But he left a feeling. That stayed with me. Because long after someone is gone, what we remember, is how we felt when they were near. Not what they wore. Not the clever things they said. But the feeling. And that's when I began asking myself, do people feel me when I'm with them? Or am I just there? I realized I had spent most of my life half present. One eye on the conversation, the other on my phone. One foot in the moment, the other in the next plan, the next worry, the next need. And ironically, I wanted people to miss me, when I was never really there to begin with. That's when I turned to Stoicism again. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Concentrate every minute like a Roman on doing what's in front of you with precision and care, and free yourself from all other distractions." To be fully present is not just a gift to others. It's a discipline of the soul. So I started practicing. When I spoke with someone, I looked them in the eyes. When I listened, I didn't interrupt. When I laughed, I let it come from the belly, not from politeness. And when I loved, I let it be slow, full, and without performance. It was awkward at first. Unfamiliar. Like learning to walk again. But slowly, I felt the difference. People lingered in conversation longer. They opened up. They breathed easier. Not because I said anything profound, but because I was really there. And over time, something even more profound happened. Even when I wasn't in the room, people remembered how they felt around me. Calm. Heard. Safe. It reminded me of something Epictetus once implied: you can't control what people say when you're gone, but you can control how you made them feel while you were here. This is what it means to be present, so present, that your absence still carries weight. You don't need to be flashy. You don't need to impress. You don't even need to say much. But when your presence is intentional, you leave behind a trace. A memory. A feeling. And that's what people miss. Not the noise but the depth. Not your presence online but your presence in them. So here's what I've learned: be so grounded in the moment that you don't need to be remembered loudly, because your quiet was already unforgettable. Now, let's go deeper still. Because when you learn to show up fully, without expectation, without the need to perform, you start living not to be missed, but to be meaningful. And the next lesson is about that shift from attention seeking to meaning making. Let's talk about how to live in a way that people miss your essence, not your noise. That's next. 7. Don't try to be missed by living well. I used to think that being missed meant staying in someone's mind. That if they thought about me late at night, if a song reminded them of me, if they felt something when I disappeared, that meant I mattered. So I tried to leave impressions. Subtle posts. Lingering words. Delayed replies, not because I was busy, but because I wanted them to feel the lack. It was also calculated. And honestly, it was exhausting. Because no matter how clever the strategy, you can't force someone to miss you. You can only become someone worth missing. And that requires something deeper. It requires you to live well. I remember a turning point in my life. I had just turned 48. A good friend of mine passed away unexpectedly. We weren't in touch often. But when I heard the news, my chest sank. Why? Because even in his absence, his life still echoed. He didn't try to be important. He just lived well. He loved his family fiercely. He worked with quiet integrity. He helped others without posting about it. He didn't impress people. He impacted them. And standing at his memorial, listening to stories from people he helped, mentored, laughed with, I realized something: being missed is not the goal. Living well is. And when you live well, being missed is a byproduct. The Stoics believed this too. Seneca wrote, "Life is long, if you know how to use it." So I started living differently. I stopped trying to leave emotional fingerprints everywhere. I focused instead on building a life I respected, not one designed to impress others. I woke up earlier. Not to hustle harder, but to enjoy the quiet before the world got loud. I invested in people without expecting loyalty in return. I spoke truthfully, even when it cost me something. And I did small things with full attention: washing dishes, tending the garden, smiling at strangers. I started asking myself every night, did I live today in a way I wouldn't regret if tomorrow never came? That single question changed my life. And slowly, I noticed something unexpected. People began reaching out, not because I was being strategic, but because they felt something had shifted. They missed the energy, not the tactics. They missed the way I made them feel calm, understood, safe, not the clever words I used. Here's the truth: you don't need to be loud to be lasting. You just need to be real. Don't try to be missed. Don't manufacture longing. Just live so truthfully, so fully, so deeply aligned with your values, that when you're gone, the space you leave behind is shaped like you. That's the mark of a life well lived. And that is unforgettable. Now that we've talked about living well, let's move into a space that few are willing to enter: solitude. Not loneliness, but chosen, powerful solitude. Because that's where your true self is forged. And that's our next lesson. 8. Embrace solitude. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I didn't understand that when I was younger. Back then, silence terrified me. An empty room felt like a failure. A weekend without plans felt like punishment. So I filled the quiet with noise, with people, with distractions. Anything, to avoid myself. But sometime after I turned 46, life got quiet, not by choice, but by force. My kids were grown. My phone stopped ringing as often. Some friends drifted, and the relationship I thought would last, didn't. I remember one evening I came home to an apartment that was spotless, still, and silent. I sat down. No TV. No music. No notifications. Just me. And the silence I used to run from. And for the first time, I didn't try to escape it. I just sat in it. It was uncomfortable, but strangely honest. Because in that silence, I heard something I hadn't heard in years: my own voice. Not the one shaped by what others wanted. Not the one trying to impress. But the quiet, steady voice beneath it all, asking, are you proud of the life you're building? Or are you just filling time? That was the beginning of everything changing. The Stoics understood this long before I did. Seneca wrote, true happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence upon the future. And the present is where solitude lives. It's not the absence of people. It's the presence of self. So I began spending more time with myself on purpose. Walks without a destination. Journaling without editing. Sitting on the porch at sunset, with nothing but the sound of the wind and my breath. And slowly, the silence became a friend. In solitude, I started asking different questions, not what does the world think of me? But what do I think of me? Not who loves me right now. But do I love the person I've become? It wasn't always pretty. There were regrets. Unhealed wounds. Parts of me I had ignored for years. But solitude gave me space to face them without shame. And over time, it became my sanctuary. It became the place where I remembered who I am, when no one's watching. Solitude is where your spirit grows strong roots. It's where you stop performing and start becoming. You don't need to fear being alone. Because in truth, you're never truly alone when you've made peace with yourself. And ironically, the more comfortable you become in solitude, the more powerful your presence becomes in the world. People can sense it. They can feel that you're not desperate for company but open to connection. They know you're not seeking to be filled but willing to share from a place of wholeness. That's magnetic. That's stoic. So the next time life gets quiet, don't rush to fill it. Listen. Because that's where your real transformation begins. And now, after learning to embrace solitude, we're ready for a deeper shift, speaking less, doing more. Letting action not noise define who we are. That's the next step on this journey. Let's go there together. 9. Speak less. Do more. There was a time in my life when I talked too much, about who I wanted to become. I had plans. Big ones. I'd tell people I was going to start writing, take better care of my health, learn something new, be more present, more patient, more disciplined. But months would pass, and nothing changed. I was always about to do something. And for a while, I convinced myself talking about growth felt like growing. But it wasn't. It was delay. It was fear disguised as words. And deep down, I knew it. There's a quote from Epictetus that haunted me: "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." I read that one morning early while sipping coffee, alone in the kitchen. And I sat there, cup in hand, asking myself a hard question: if I couldn't say anything about who I am, would my life still reflect it? That question changed me. Because I realized my words were ahead of my actions. And I was tired of being inspiring in conversation, but inconsistent in life. So I made a quiet decision that day. No more announcements. No more telling people what I was going to do. Just doing it. I stopped saying, "I'm trying to eat better." I just changed what was in my fridge. I stopped saying, "I need to get back to reading." I just started reading one page at a time. I stopped saying, "I want to be more dependable." I simply started showing up on time, every time. It was strange, at first. There were no compliments. No "wow, look at you." Just silence. But that silence was grounding. Because I was no longer performing. I was becoming. And over time, people noticed, not because I told them, but because they felt the difference. My presence got quieter. My decisions got stronger. And most importantly, my self-respect began to grow. You see, the Stoics weren't loud men. They didn't tweet their wisdom. They lived it. Day by day. Word by word. Choice by choice. They taught us, your actions are your philosophy. Everything else is decoration. So if you want to be missed, don't post more. Don't talk more. Don't seek applause. Live in a way where your actions whisper who you are, and those whispers echo when you're gone. Speak less. Not because words don't matter, but because action gives them meaning. Now, as we near the end of this journey, there's one final piece left to understand. The Stoics believed, a well-lived life is not about perfect control, but about living in harmony with nature, with flow, with your deepest values. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what it means to live not for noise, but for virtue, and to find a peace that doesn't fade. That's our final lesson. 10. Live by values, not by reactions. I used to react to everything. A harsh word and I'd lash back. A cold message and I'd spiral. Someone ignored me, I'd feel invisible. Someone praised me, I'd feel worthy. My emotional life was a roller coaster, and I wasn't the one steering. Then one day, after an argument with someone I loved, I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel not to drive, but because I didn't trust what I'd say next. I was tired of the outbursts. Tired of apologizing for things I said when I was triggered. Tired of being pulled in every direction by things and people outside of me. That's when I remembered something from Marcus Aurelius: if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. The Stoics weren't perfect, but they were clear about one thing: don't live by impulse. Live by principle. So I asked myself, what do I believe in truly? Not what do I want in the moment. Not what feels good right now. But what do I stand for when the emotions settle? And I started writing it down. One by one. I believe in honesty even when it's hard. I believe in calm even when I'm provoked. I believe in kindness even when it's not returned. I believe in self-respect even when it costs me attention. Those became my compass. And slowly, I began to feel something shift. Not right away, but over time. I stopped reacting to every message. I paused before replying. Sometimes, I didn't reply at all, not out of anger, but because not everything deserves your energy. I stopped entering arguments I didn't need to win. I started choosing peace over being right. Dignity over drama. Stillness over noise. And strangely, I felt stronger. Not louder. Stronger. Because when you live by values, you don't get pulled into every storm. You become the calm in the center of it. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Reactions are easy. Values take courage. Anyone can snap. Anyone can get offended. Anyone can post, reply, argue, defend. But it takes strength to respond with grace. To step back and ask, is this aligned with who I want to be? And when you start living that way, you become consistent. People know what to expect from you. And more importantly, you know what to expect from yourself. That's power. Not in how much you control others, but in how deeply you control yourself. So here's what I've learned: let your values be your filter. Let your character be your legacy. That's how you build a life that doesn't just impress in the moment, but inspires for years to come. That's how you become someone who doesn't just want to be remembered but deserves to be. And when you live like that, you don't need to make people miss you. They will. Not because you begged for it, but because your presence had weight. Your words had truth. And your life had depth. That is the Stoic way. And that is the life I now choose to live. You don't need tricks to make someone miss you. You don't need to play games. What you need is clarity. What you need is discipline. What you need is to fall in love with becoming who you're meant to be. When you stop seeking to be missed, you become unforgettable. If this message resonated with you, consider joining our journey. Tap subscribe and let's continue walking the Stoic path together. Next, watch Emotional Self-Control, the most powerful Stoic trait you're ignoring. Click now and deepen your resilience.